Well, my name's Alan Smith. I was born and raised in East Fort Worth. I went to Eastern Hills High School, Tarrant County Junior College, graduated from University of Texas at Arlington. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was combat search and rescue air crewman in Vietnam. I went to pilot training in the Navy, and I flew as a pilot in the Navy for 16 years. I retired from the Navy after 27 years. And then I flew commercially for 10 years before my back went out. I've had 3 back surgeries. I'm disabled now. And I live here alone with my 2 sweet dogs. I heard a gunshot. I didn't hear any barking. I didn't hear any yelling. Nothing. I'd heard a gunshot. I turned to my neighbor and said, "That sounded like a gunshot." And then we both agreed, this is East Fort Worth. No big deal. And about that time, my neighbor's son came running around on my side of the property. I was on my neighbor's property at the time. He came running around with my 2 dogs, and he was yelling incoherently, and I suddenly realized something was very wrong here, and I got up and ran over, and I saw one of my dogs bleeding profusely. And so then I realized he'd been shot, and I grabbed him and by the collar, and we went out. I tried to put him in my car, but he didn't want to move. And then I looked up and I saw a person out in the street. There was an SUV on the far side of the street, and there was a Hispanic male standing in the street on this side of the car. And I walked up to him and I asked him, "Are you the MFer that shot my dog?" And he said, "Yes." And I'm like, "Why?" He said, "I felt threatened." And then I called him a couple of more expletives, and then I decided it was time for me to leave because I had to find somebody to save my dog. Now the 2 things that the 3 things I had when I approached him that he didn't have, well, there was one thing we both had, and that was a weapon. I had a weapon on me with my permit, and he did not have a permit. The policeman told me he did not have a permit. I had a permit, and I had good judgment because I kept my pistol in my pocket. When you have a weapons permit, you're trained to assess the situation, assess the threat, take your options in order, and then react. This man did nothing but react. He shot my dog. He didn't yell at him. He didn't fire a warning shot to try to scare him. He just shot him. And that's reprehensible. And what's happened after all this makes it even worse because now he's fabricating events that just simply did not occur. I took my dog to the vet, and that wonderful veterinarian out at Hewlin Animal Hospital saved his life. I picked him up the next morning, and he's right here, and he's doing great. I've had neither Pilar nor Pedro Juarez approach me about how are my dogs doing. How about the vet bill, my $2,530.39 vet bill? I've heard nothing from them. All I've heard is vitriol that this man is putting out on social media. They do a very extensive background investigation. It's not cheap. It costs, at the time I did it, was probably about $350, $400. But they do a very extensive background investigation, comprehending your mental capabilities, any past felonies, misdemeanors, anything that might prevent you from having a weapon on your person out in the general public. Every time I walk out of this house, I've got a gun in my pocket. And it's for my protection and for the people around me's protection. I hope to never have to use it. But see, that's just it. Had I walked out there and had he turned around and reached into the car and said, "Pilar, let me have my gun," well, he'd been facing a very different person when he turned back around. It's called judgment. Well, I had my weapon, but I chose not to draw it because there was not a threat. Had he turned to the vehicle and asked his wife to hand him his weapon, then that would have been a threat to me. He's doing great. He's eating, he's drinking, he's taking his meds. He's going to be fine. The bullet entered his right cheek and above the jawline, and it blew out. It lodged in his sinus cavity, and well, the veterinarian told me that the bullet just kind of took a circuitous route and ended up in his sinus. And I've got a nice little pillbox full of his teeth. He doesn't have any teeth from the canine all the way back, so I'm going to have to be buying expensive soft dog food from now on. I'll tell you exactly what happened. Leanne, who you interviewed earlier, she has several grandchildren, and anytime I pull into the driveway and the grandkids are over there in her yard, I always get the dogs stoked up. It's like, there's the grandkids, there's Leanne's grandkids. And so I open the door and I say, go see Leanne and the grandkids, and they take off next door and they get petted and their butts scratched and life is good. Well, I guarantee you what happened when that man and his daughters walked by out here. Duncan was in the breezeway because that's where he always stays if I'm over at Leanne's in their backyard. And he got up, whoa, there's the kids. And so he went out there, tail wagging, grinning, expecting to get his butt scratched, and he got a bullet to the head. They were not. And to my chagrin, I've thought for years that as long as my dogs were in my yard, I was in compliance with city ordinance. Well, that's not the case. I was actually basically at fault because they're supposed to be behind a 48-inch minimum fence, keeping them in the yard. I did not know that. For years, I did not know that. I didn't even know you're supposed to register your dog with the city of Fort Worth. How many other people don't know that? Bottom line is, Mr. Pedro didn't get a citation. Alan Smith did. But I'm going to pay it because I'm guilty. But I've never had Pedro or Pilar call me up to apologize, say, you know, this is really bad. What can we do to help? Etc., etc., etc. And that to me is reprehensible. What is really reprehensible is this man is still walking around. He could be at Walmart right now with a 9mm in his hip pocket. And I find that reprehensible, especially the fact that the police did not cite him for a Class A misdemeanor. I've never been issued a citation for my dogs being loose in all the years. I've had my dogs in the front yard when code compliance drove by. They never stopped. I would like somebody to have Pedro produce something that looks like that, because he told the Fort Worth Weekly that he has documentation for his weapon. Well, that tells me, since he doesn't have one of these, that he's got a sales receipt or something. But you see, the thing about it is, I knew when I walked in the front yard before I ever spoke to the man that he did not have a permit. Because number one, he would not have done what he did, because you're trained. You assess the situation, you explore your options, and then you react. He did nothing but shoot, because had he done what he would have been trained to have done, we would have heard 2 shots. Well, we would have heard yelling first, then we would have heard 2 shots, not one. The first shot would have been in the ground to scare the dog. The second one would have been between the eyes to put the dog down. Because if the first 2 don't work and the dog keeps coming, and my daughters are there, the dog's going down. And he couldn't even kill the dog. That's how bad a shot he is. I mean, his judgment is as bad as his aim. There were several mistakes made here. Okay, the first one was my fault. My dogs were not restrained. Okay, and I'm going to have to live with that. Every time I look at him, it grinds at my guts. He was not restrained. Okay, but this guy was knowingly, illegally carrying a firearm on his person, and he shot my dog. He discharged a firearm illegally in the city of Fort Worth. That's the third thing that went wrong. The fourth thing was his wife pulled in some favors with somebody in the city of Fort Worth to keep him from getting a citation. And fifth and sixth, or is it fourth and fifth? If it was the police chief that told them to cease and desist, that's wrong. The last thing is that the officers, they didn't do their job. They let the guy walk. They let him walk without a citation. And clear, I mean, absolute clear violation of state and city law. I got that Monday afternoon by an Officer Garcia from Animal Control. Funny you say that, because that's exactly what I asked her. And she said, I am not here to judge, I'm just simply here to do my job. And I said, thank you. Well, when I got back from the veterinarian, the officer, I questioned both officers one at a time, and I asked them, first of all, did the gentleman have a permit to carry a weapon? And the officer said no. And therefore, the next question is, did you issue a citation? No. Next question, why? Well, because we didn't see him actually shoot the dog. Really? Well, is there not a shell casing around here somewhere? Yes, we have the shell casing. And I said, do you see a lot of blood out here? Yes, we see a lot of blood. And he was getting a little bit perturbed with me at the time, so basically it went away. The next day, Monday afternoon, an Officer Garcia from Animal Control showed up and got all the information about what happened, and then said she was going to have to issue me 2 citations for my dogs being unrestrained. And I was a little taken aback by that, and I said, I asked her, in your heart of hearts, don't you know this is wrong? And she says, I'm not here to judge, I'm here to do my job. And I asked her, so you didn't see my dogs running around loose, yet you're going to give me a citation? Yes. I'm like, thank you very much. And I took my citation, and I'm going to plead guilty and ask for probation. So, I mean, the worst that man was going to get when he shot my dog, wantonly and cowardly shot my dog.